Let's say you are in the business of selling apples. You sell apples that you grow. You grow apples, trees. You harvest the apples. And then you choose from among the apples that you harvest the ones you're going to sell. And the apples you sell to the public. Let's say that you are an apple farmer growing apples, selling apples you grow to a public that consumes the apples, and that you have found, the public has complained, that you have a number of bad apples year after year after year. You have bad apples this year and next year and next year and next year. And every year people have been complaining about your apples. And let's say that you really wanted to fix your problem with the apples. Would you then create a business that's dedicated to protecting the bad apples? Would you create a system aimed at protecting bad apples from being thrown out of your business? Would you create a situation where people who raise bad apples and sell bad apples and send bad apples to the market could keep doing it year after year after year? And then would you create a situation where when people got sick or worse died from the bad apples, that the people who sell and train and raise the bad apples could not be sued for the bad apples? What kind of trust do you think people should have in folks who run that kind of business? Now, I have just now described the problem people are complaining about with police unions. Because when you hear the complaints about law enforcement abuse, being abusive and homicidal, one of the first responses you get is, we don't have a systemic problem, we just a few, yes, bad apples. Go back to my example. If you have bad apples year after year after year, and you create a system whereby you cannot get rid of the bad apples, where you can't track the bad apples, where the reports about the bad apples cannot be found and you cannot be used against the bad apples in discipline, where you have to promote the bad apples, where the bad apples become training officers, where the bad apples become leaders in the apple business. That's not a system that is trying to root out, eradicate bad apples. That's a system that is trying to perpetuate bad apples. And that system deserves no trust. That system deserves no respect. That system requires changing. How do you change it? First of all, you realize that you don't have bad apples year after year after year without people intentionally creating bad apples. How did Derek Chauvin get to be the training officer for the other three officers in Minneapolis? Because he had been on the Minneapolis police force for 19 years, for a decade, almost 2 decades. Somebody in the system, year after year after year, kept him in the system, and knowing that he had complaints against him, kept him there. You root that people out, but you also have to training people. He's training, you have to train people. You have to fundamentally change the way this policing culture operates. And that includes changing the way the unions protect the police officers who are found to be, quote, bad apples. Lastly, there's a way to deal with the unions. Decertify them. The municipality can simply say, we no longer will recognize this police union because we have found that you are enabling practices that are harming the public, and we will decertify you, and we will look for another organization, another collective bargaining agent. Well, that's one way to look at this. The alternative is to keep letting bad apple sellers sell bad apples and then say, we just have a few bad apples. You just got to live with that. No, we're dying from it. We're dying from it. And people are getting sick and tired. No, they've long past been sick and tired of a whole society dying because of a police culture that enables and protects its, quote, bad apples. Time to put that culture out of business.